In a new interview with NBC News, President Trump took ownership of the current state of the economy, saying, "I'm very proud of it," he said. This comes as there is new polling showing that many voters are not as happy as the president with the way that things are going with said economy. CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton, is running the numbers on this, but also speaks to the changing nature of President Trump's base right now. Talk me through this.
Yeah, okay. So, if you know anything about Donald Trump, you know that he built his two presidential victories on winning voters without a college degree, while Donald Trump's base with non-college voters is absolutely collapsing. What are we talking about here? Well, why don't we just take a look? Voters without a college degree on Donald Trump. Look at this. Back in 2024, he won those voters over Kamala Harris by 14 points. You come over to this side of the screen. What's his net approval rating with him?
Imagine waking up one morning, sitting in the most powerful office on the planet, and finding out that a federal judge just dismantled one of your most critical weapons. Not in a small technical procedural way, but completely ripped it out of your hands. Gone.
We have to win this election, most important election ever. We want a landslide that's too big to rig. If you want to save America, get your friends, get your family, get everyone you know, and vote. Vote early, vote absentee, vote on election day. I don't care how, but you have to get out and vote. And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian.
Right before the most important election of your life. That is exactly what just happened to Donald Trump. And the panic inside the White House right now, it is very, very real. A federal judge in Seattle just killed Trump's executive order that was specifically designed to force states into changing their voting rules before the 2026 midterms. And let's be crystal clear about what this actually means, because this isn't some bureaucratic footnote buried in the legal section of the news. This is the judicial system looking Donald Trump directly in the face and saying, you don't get to rig this election, not on our watch. And Trump, he is spiraling. Here's how this whole thing went down. Back in March, Trump signed a sweeping executive order that was essentially a masterclass in political blackmail. The message was simple and brutal. States that refused to adopt his preferred voting rules, stricter photo ID requirements, aggressive purges of voter rolls, tighter registration deadlines, heavy restrictions on mail-in voting would lose their federal election funding. That's it. That was the deal. Comply with Trump's voting wish list or watch your election infrastructure collapse without the federal dollars keeping it alive. It was a gun pressed against the temple of every state that dared to run elections differently than Trump wanted. And it wasn't subtle. Trump wasn't hiding what he was doing. He needed Democratic-leaning states and purple battleground states to make voting harder, because Trump understands one fundamental political truth better than almost anyone. When more Americans vote, he loses. So his strategy has always been the same. Build walls around the ballot box. Make the process exhausting. Make it confusing. Make it just difficult enough that the wrong people give up and stay home. But Judge John H. Chun wasn't buying it for a single second. The ruling was devastating in its clarity. The judge said Trump's order violated the separation of powers because the authority to control how federal money is spent belongs to Congress, not the president. Trump can't unilaterally decide to punish states financially because they won't do what he says. He needs congressional authorization, and Congress never gave him that authority. Beyond that, the judge said the order trampled on states' constitutional rights. Elections are a state function. That's federalism. That's the foundational architecture of the American system. The federal government can set baseline rules, but it cannot storm in and commandeer every detail of how states run their elections. It absolutely cannot use funding threats as a weapon to force states into specific policies. The judge didn't sugarcoat it. Trump was acting outside his legal authority. The order was unconstitutional and, just like that, blocked, dead, unenforceable nationwide. Now, let's talk about what was actually inside this executive order, because the details tell you everything you need to know about what Trump was really after. On the surface, it all sounds perfectly reasonable. Voter ID laws, sure. Who's against verifying identity? Citizenship verification for registration. Sounds logical, right? Regular voter RO purges to clean up the lists. Seems responsible. Tighter controls on mail and ballots and early voting, just securing the process. But peel back the surface and the picture gets very different very fast. The reality of strict voter ID laws is that millions of Americans, disproportionately poor, elderly, and minority citizens, don't possess the specific forms of identification these laws require. Voter roll purges, which sound like routine maintenance, have a long track record of accidentally removing legitimate voters from the rolls, often without adequate notice. Mail-in voting restrictions don't hurt wealthy professionals who can take a long lunch break to visit a polling location. They hurt shift workers, people with disabilities, caregivers, the people for whom flexibility in voting isn't a convenience but a necessity. Every single one of these rules that Trump packaged as election security measures lands hardest on voters who tend to pull the lever for Democrats. This wasn't about fraud. Every serious investigation, every independent audit, every comprehensive study conducted over decades has confirmed the same thing. Widespread voter fraud in American elections is essentially non-existent. We're talking about isolated, rare individual cases, statistically invisible against the backdrop of hundreds of millions of votes. There is no fraud crisis. There never was. So when Trump demands all these emergency security measures, the explanation can't be the fraud. The explanation is suppression. And Judge Chun's ruling just ripped that tool out of Trump's hands entirely. Now, here's where it gets existential for Trump. And I mean that word literally, because this ruling isn't just a political setback. For Trump personally, losing control over election mechanics is tied directly to his fear of losing everything, not just the presidency. Everything. Trump knows something that his supporters don't always fully absorb. The moment he stops being president, he stops being protected. Presidential immunity evaporates. Executive privilege disappears. The Department of Justice, which he currently controls, would no longer be his personal shield. He'd be a private citizen again. And as a private citizen, every indictment that was dropped, every investigation that was paused, every case that was shelved because of the DOJ policy against prosecuting a sitting president, all of it potentially comes back to life. The Georgia case, the classified documents, the federal election interference charges that Jack Smith spent years building, all of it. So when Trump talks about the midterms, when he tells Republicans they absolutely must hold Congress or he's finished, he's not speaking in political abstractions. He's talking about his own physical freedom, his survival. Congressional control is the wall between him and accountability. And this ruling just made that wall harder to maintain. Because here's the math. If Democrats flip the House in 2026, they get subpoena power. They get investigative authority. They can drag Trump officials in front of committees under oath. They can demand documents. They can hold public hearings that put every scandal, the Georgia pressure campaign, the Epstein files, the hush money payments, the fraud judgment front and center on the national stage for months. And with Jack Smith's entire documented case file already sitting in the public record, they don't even have to build cases from scratch. The work is already done. Trump needed his voter suppression executive order to tilt the playing field. He needed to make voting harder in competitive states. He needed to suppress turnout in cities and among younger voters. Without that advantage, the 2026 map gets dramatically more dangerous for Republicans. And this loss doesn't stand alone. That's the part that should genuinely frighten Trump's inner circle. This ruling is part of a pattern that's been building for months. Federal judges have already struck down other sections of this same executive order. Courts have blocked Trump's immigration crackdowns. They've overturned his attempts to shut down federal agencies. They've ruled against his personnel firings over and over across different jurisdictions, different judges appointed by presidents of both parties. The answer keeps coming back the same. You can't do this. This is illegal. This violates the Constitution. Stop. And here's what makes that pattern so maddening for Trump. He can't do anything about it. He can rage on social media. He can call judges activists and deep state operatives and Democrats in robes, but he cannot fire them. Federal judges are appointed for life precisely so they cannot be bullied, cannot be pressured, cannot be removed by a president who doesn't like their rulings. The founders built this system on purpose. They understood that a president without an independent judiciary checking his power was simply a tyrant with extra steps. And right now, those lifetime appointed, unbulleted, unfreeable judges are doing exactly what the founders designed them to do. Trump doesn't believe in checks and balances. Not really. He believes in dominance. He believes the presidency should function as unchecked authority, that the president should be able to issue an order and have it obeyed without question. When courts say no, he doesn't see it as the system working correctly. He sees it as betrayal. He sees it as the deep state conspiring against him. But the rest of the country, the part that isn't already locked into Trump's media universe, sees something completely different. They see a judge reading the Constitution and enforcing it. They see presidential overreach being stopped. They see the system holding. And that distinction matters enormously heading into 2026. Democrats are going to make that election about democracy itself, not just immigration numbers or grocery prices, though those matter. They're going to stand in front of voters and say, look at what this man tried to do. He tried to control how you vote. He tried to threaten states into making it harder for you to cast a ballot. He tried to rig the game before a single vote was counted, and the only thing that stopped him was a federal judge doing his job. Now ask yourself, what happens if Republicans hold Congress and there's no one left to stop him? That is a powerful argument, especially for the suburban moderates, the independent voters, the quietly uncomfortable Republicans who've been wincing at Trump's authoritarian tendencies but haven't yet found the motivation to break. This ruling gives Democrats a concrete, documented, court-validated example of Trump trying to abuse presidential power to manipulate elections. That's not spin. That's a federal judge's written opinion. When voter turnout is high and elections are genuinely accessible, Democrats win. That's not partisan commentary. It's demographic reality. There are more registered Democrats than Republicans in this country. The Republican electoral strategy has always depended, at least in part, on keeping certain voters from showing up. Trump understood that better than anyone. It's why this executive order existed in the first place. And it's why losing it stings so deeply, not just as a legal matter, but as a cold, hard political calculation about what November 2026 is going to look like. Trump is going to appeal this ruling. His lawyers are probably already drafting the paperwork, but the legal landscape isn't friendly. Multiple judges have already reached the same conclusion about this executive order and related attempts at election control. The pattern of losses suggests the appeals won't fare much better than the original orders did. So where does that leave us? It leaves us here. Trump wanted to walk into the 2026 midterms with his hand on the scale. He wanted the rules tilted. He wanted the obstacles in place. He wanted the suppression machinery running at full capacity. And a federal judge in Seattle just dismantled it and told him to go compete on a level playing field like everyone else. That is Donald Trump's genuine nightmare. Not the headline, not the bad press cycle, the level playing field, the fair fight, the election where the rules are the rules, and every eligible American who wants to vote can walk up and do it without hitting a wall that his administration built specifically to stop them. Because when that happens, and when the game isn't rigged, when turnout is free and high and unobstructed, Trump loses. He knows it. His team knows it. And now, thanks to Judge Chun's ruling, the entire country knows it too. The courts are drawing the line, the judiciary is holding firm. And Trump, for all his bluster and all his power and all his years of bulldozing through every norm and rule and institution that got in his way, Trump just ran into a wall he cannot knock down, cannot buy off, and cannot fire. And the 2026 midterms just became a completely different race because of